Today we'll be discussing the 2020 film The Invisible Man, which was directed by Leigh Whannell and stars Elizabeth Moss. Now let me make some adjustments here, just a minute. Okay, that's a little better. Anyway, this film was released this year, and it actually did make it to theaters for just a little bit before the whole pandemic thing happened, and it got wiped out of theaters along with a lot of other movies. This was a film that I saw the trailer for. I didn't see it in theaters. It popped up on like instant demand on Amazon Prime. It was like $20 though to order the movie that way. Again, I passed and eventually just rented it on Redbox when it came out. So this isn't a movie that's necessarily available to stream. You can still rent it like from Amazon Prime. It's down to like $5 now or something. But this was a Redbox rental, and like I said, did not get to see the movie in theaters. Let me just turn this up a little bit more. And we're back to normal. Okay, so I'm just gonna say up front that I was quite disappointed with this film. So this is going to be a film review, but it's going to rely heavily on me going into some spoilers. So I'll keep it spoiler free for now, and I'll warn you towards the end once we get into very heavy spoiler territory. The film is about our main character, Cecilia. She's in this kind of destructive relationship with a guy named Adrian. At the beginning of the film, she escapes, runs away. Her sister's helping her get out of his house, and then she ends up at a friend's place and kind of stays there and hides out, hoping that he won't come after her. Pretty quickly, strange things start happening that lead Cecilia to believe that Adrian has in fact found a way to become invisible and is now stalking her. And of course, she's having a hard time getting anyone to believe this story, including her sister, her close friend, and of course the authorities. Now I want to say before I get into the things that really bugged me about this film is that I really genuinely was excited about the movie, and it wasn't just hype. I mean, a lot of the reviews have been really positive. In fact, I don't really see any negative reviews when I look online. But the reason I was looking forward to the film more than anything was the director, Leigh Whannell. So his previous film called Upgrade was a huge surprise for me. It's a movie that I heard positive things about, finally saw it, and was really, really surprised. Because previously, Leigh Whannell has been primarily known as a screenwriter, going all the way back to the original Saw film in 2004. That's the first time I heard of him. And I was really a fan of both him and director James Wan. And together, they started the Saw franchise, and Leigh would continue to write scripts for the movies as well as act in them. He played Adam, so he's one of the guys in the bathroom in the very first Saw film, plays that character through the first 3 movies, and he also wrote the script for those first 3 films. So I was really impressed with his writing and directing in Upgrade, and was just excited to see what he was going to work on next. And The Invisible Man seemed like a nice little return to horror. So first, I'll say the things about the film that I do like. I do think it's generally well written. His directing is still very good here. The look of the film is really nice. It's definitely got that digital modern look, but the colors are really vibrant. The details are nice and sharp. And just the composition of the shots and the movement of the shots is really good. In his film Upgrade, he kind of was dabbling in these camera movements, and he continues to employ that device here. So there are scenes where we kind of see the camera panning and like indicating that someone might be, in the next room or down the hall. Likewise, there's action scenes where the camera kind of falls and tilts, with the action of like someone falling to the ground or something like that. So he still does that stuff here, and I'm glad to see that that was a nice carryover that he used a lot in the previous film Upgrade that I've been talking about. Elizabeth Moss does a very good job conveying the dread of the situation and also the just extreme frustration of people not believing her. Now, something else about this film that really seems to give it a lot of praise, and maybe this is just why critics are praising the movie so much. I mean, this is a horror film. Horror films don't generally get lavished, this kind of praise upon that often. But I think the reason maybe is because it tapped into kind of this social message dealing with the Me Too movement, and more generally just like believing women when they say something is happening to them. And this is exactly what a film like this needed. I mean, it's a remake of a classic horror film, although the film itself bears little resemblance to the story and plot of the original. But it's nice when these modern horror films can kind of find an edge or like a social, issue to address without preaching. And so I think people really latched onto that idea, and that's what the movie showcases a lot, is using this kind of fascinating and kind of like really kind of unbelievable circumstance to illustrate just how women can struggle when they know something has happened to them, whether it's sexual harassment or just discrimination in the workplace. So I think this is something that people really latched onto with the film and are really praising that aspect of it. But to me, the film really suffers in the storytelling department and really even fails at being a very scary film, in my opinion. We get a lot of the typical shots you might expect of things moving when no one appears to be there. And this is actually done in a few creative ways throughout the film, but also in very, very simple ways. I don't know what the budget of this movie was. I imagine, it probably moved up from his previous film, but definitely not a big budget movie. And so a lot of the devices employed here that are kind of showing that an invisible presence is in the room are very, very low budget. There doesn't necessarily even need to be CGI involved. We just kind of see things moving and, just very, very simple setups that definitely, I'm sure, saved a lot of money on the budget. But for the most part are effective, just not really that scary. You might call them more creepy and unsettling, I suppose. Unfortunately for me, that's kind of where the list of good things about the film ends. There's really just some problems I have with the movie, and we're still in the spoiler-free territory here, so you're safe for a little bit longer if you haven't seen the film. But what I'll say before moving on to more spoilery stuff is that I think the main problem with this film lies with the character of the Invisible Man himself. And I'm going to have to look up this actor's name. The guy who plays Adrian, his name is Oliver Jackson Cohen, and I think he's like a relatively new actor. You probably recognize him if you saw The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. He plays one of the characters in that show, and in that role he got to display a wide range of emotions. That's the first thing I'd seen this particular actor in. He did a phenomenal job in that series. In this film, he really doesn't get to shine as much. Mostly because we don't actually physically see him. But the actor does make appearances throughout the film, and I just feel like he's not in it enough. We don't know enough about this character of Adrian, and everything we know about him comes from Cecilia's character. And because she spoon-feeds us all the information, there's never any doubt that what she's saying is true. There's never any suspense that he's actually this crazy person, that their relationship was bad, and that he's somehow managed to make himself invisible. These are things that you think the movie might be able to make some suspense about, like whether she's actually crazy or whether it's really happening. I admit that the film is called The Invisible Man, so I suppose there's really no trying to trick the audience into whether he is actually invisible or not. But just about their relationship, we don't really ever understand like why it went bad or where it went bad or why she was with this guy for so long. She makes him sound just horrible, like a horrible person, just a very big control freak. There might have been some abuse there, we don't really know, but all the information from this character comes through Cecilia, and we just never really see anything. We just believe her, we take her word for it because we're on her side through the whole movie. So I think that really is a big problem with the film, is that by the time we do get to see him in person, we really don't know who he is. He's almost like a stranger, even though we've been dealing with him through the course of the film. And again, the actor playing him does, a pretty good job, but he doesn't get enough time to really give us this memorable villain because, again, we don't see him for most of the movie. So at this point, I'm just going to give the film my personal rating now before we move into heavy spoiler territory where I can discuss the things that really bugged me about this film. So yeah, my personal rating for The Invisible Man will be 5 spooky handprints out of 10. Really wish I could give the movie more, but honestly I think I'm being pretty generous as is. The movie's not so bad that it's offensive, but it's also not nearly as good as I was expecting, and not as good as I think a lot of people seem to believe it is, and I just don't understand why. So we're going into heavy spoiler zone here. If you plan to see the film and haven't seen it yet, don't continue with us, but if you have seen it, or if you just know you're not going to see the movie and want to know why I dislike it so much, then let's move ahead now. So I have some notes that I put down. These were notes that I jotted after watching the film. It's not what you want a movie to leave you with, but all I could do was think about these problematic areas of the film that really just ruined the viewing experience for me, and I probably would never watch the film again personally. But these are the issues that stuck out to me. So here's the first one, and this is the first point in the film where I was kind of taken out of the movie and just didn't believe what was happening. So we already talked about at the beginning of the film, like Cecilia is escaping from the guy. She has a sister who helps her escape. And, you know, a little later into the film, you know, we're at the point now where Adrian is invisible and he's doing all these things to both scare her, but also to kind of sabotage her relationships and make her look crazy. So he somehow, you know, gets into her email, you know, whether he hacked it or whether he just knows her login information. And he sends this really mean-spirited email to Cecilia's sister, you know, just saying these crazy things like that, you know, she doesn't want her in her life anymore, and like just all these like, you know, psycho things that the sister reads and thinks, oh, I totally believe that my sister sent me that. Like, just a totally unbelievable response. So Cecilia goes to her and, you know, she confronts her with that email, and Cecilia's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And the sister just chooses to not believe her and to believe that she did send this email. It doesn't make any sense. Anyone that has a sibling that you have even a decent relationship with, you would not just believe that they wrote this to you, totally out of character, totally different than anything they've ever done before, especially in the world we live in now where we know that something like that could have been manipulated and altered by someone else. So she just believes it. It's just completely unbelievable to me that this sister just believes that that email was actually written to her from Cecilia. The second thing, this is kind of a small thing, but again, just kind of took me out of the movie. So when Cecilia is staying with her friend, he has a younger daughter, and so it's Cecilia and this daughter are in this room together. And from what I remember, they don't even seem to be that close. Like, they're having a conversation, but it's not like they're right up next to each other. And, you know, we find out that Adrian's in the room because suddenly he slaps the daughter like really hard in the face. And because she thinks that Cecilia is the only one there, she just believes that Cecilia is the one that slapped her. And again, Cecilia's like, I didn't slap you. And I think maybe at this point she's told them that she thinks Adrian is, you know, this invisible presence and that he's there. And again, the friend doesn't believe her and his daughter doesn't believe her, the one who's been slapped. They just both immediately turn on her, think Cecilia, again, for some random reason would slap her. And, you know, I understand, you know, maybe you don't believe there's an invisible person there, but they weren't even that close together. Like, it's like if me and a friend were in a room and suddenly I was slapped, I don't understand. Like, I wouldn't, if they told me I didn't slap you and they're kind of further away than could reasonably be believed that they slapped me, it just seemed really strange. Again, everyone's turning on Cecilia without even giving her a chance to explain. They're just like, get out of here, we're done with you. Totally unbelievable, in my opinion. So now we're moving on to things that are more problematic. So the sister, they kind of like try to amend things. They go out to this dinner, and Cecilia is sitting across the table from her. It's like this nice restaurant, but they're surrounded by people. And this is the first like kill scene we get in the movie. And it's kind of a cool scene on its own. So it's like the sister is talking to Cecilia, but then she like glances up and we suddenly cut to a shot of Cecilia and we see like this knife, just this, you know, steak knife that was on the table just floating next to her. Appears to be floating. Obviously Adrian is holding it. And then he quickly, you know, slashes the sister's throat. So I have two problems with this, really. It's kind of a cool, unexpected thing. So, I mean, the setup is interesting, but I hate in movies when someone, you know, they either get shot or stabbed or whatever, and in this instance, the throat is being cut. She seems to die immediately. Like, her throat gets slashed, and just boom, head on the table, she's dead. Doesn't get to say anything, doesn't croak. And then, so that's my first problem, and it'll relate to something I'm going to say later where another person's throat gets slit and they die in a totally different way. But then, so it's like this really quick motion. Adrian slashes her throat, must grab Cecilia's hand, I guess, and he quickly puts the knife in it, and then she just stands there and holds the knife. She's sitting, I guess, she's not standing. And then it takes a couple seconds, you know, she's staring in disbelief, and then finally someone else at the other table looks over and sees her with the knife and sees the woman with her throat cut, and they're like, she did it! I just don't believe this at all. A, that no one saw a floating knife or any of that stuff happening before. That Adrian, you know, has he been practicing doing this knife swap? I mean, who would, just imagine yourself sitting somewhere and someone grabs your hand and puts a gun in it or a knife or whatever. You're gonna, that's not an easy motion to make, and then you would just hold it there and then just stand like stupidly. And then also that this nice restaurant doesn't have any kind of security system to show what actually happened. Very, very frustrating scene for me. Again, a combination of the sister just croaking like immediately, like the knife slit just ended her life right there. And then just this silly way that Adrian like frames her to look like she committed the murder with no video surveillance. Again, very unbelievable for me. Now I'm getting worked up here, but here's probably the biggest problem for me. This is a scene that takes place like maybe midway through the film. Cecilia's in this mental institution, and at this point, they think that she killed her sister, and they think she's crazy because she's been talking about her ex being invisible and stalking her or whatever. And so we get to a point where she has stolen a pen, like a writing pen, and now we're in her cell. The guard lets her in or puts her in there, and then he closes the door, and just through the camera work and the music and stuff, we know that Adrian's probably in there with her too, just he's invisible, and she senses that he's there as well. So she takes the pen and tries to like cut her wrist, but really what she's trying to get him to do is reveal himself, because he's going to stop her from doing that. And so he does, and then she's like, gotcha, or there you are, and she stabs him with the pen. We now see that he's covered in this invisible suit, but it's kind of like glitching out, and we're kind of just like seeing it pixelating. It's trying to work, but the pen has damaged it. And a security guard comes in, and then we just go through a series of dumb security guards that seem so inept at their job. So the first security guard sees him kind of like, pixelating. He doesn't know what he's looking at, so he just stares, and then Adrian like tases him like in the throat. Then we move out into the hallway. And then it's just this long scene that I feel like is supposed to be like technically cool. Like I don't know why it's so dwelled upon. Again, it kind of has those shots, so when he's taking out security guards, the camera's kind of doing cool stuff. But we really just see the same thing happen over and over again. And it's just this really tedious, like I feel like it dwelt on that scene for so long, and the problem I really have with it isn't that scene, it's what it's leading to. So we get out of the mental institution. After he takes out all these guards, like Cecilia's able to run out, and Adrian is running out as well. And what's happening is that she knows Adrian's going to her friend's house, that he's going to go like kill him and kill the daughter that he had previously slapped. So she's afraid that he's going to go murder her friends. And this leads to such a bizarre scene. Not the scene itself, because ultimately Adrian beats her there, and he starts, choking the daughter and beating up her friend, and Cecilia gets there just in time. She gets a gun and she shoots him like 5 times in the chest, and so we see the blood, and then his suit becomes visible and he falls over, and there's this reveal that is so dumb. And again, that's why this whole segment just derailed the movie for me. So this is where we see that it's not Adrian in the suit, it's his brother, who we've met previously in the film. So he's been helping him, but now it's like, oh, he's actually been wearing the suit some of the time, and then the movie kind of tries to lead us to believe that, oh, maybe it was him all along, which honestly might have been a better ending to the film, because what happens next is just implausible to me. Or not so much what happens next, but just we do eventually realize that it has been Adrian most of the time, basically all the time, except that one time, maybe, where it was the brother. So the brother's dead, and here's where I just can't get past the logic here. So if Adrian was in the mental institution with Cecilia, he was planning to be there all night, I guess. He didn't know that she had a pen. He didn't know that, she was going to stab him and like ruin his suit. So if he hadn't planned on those things happening, when in the world did his brother know that he needed to be at the friend's house, at Cecilia's friend's house, to kill them? There's just no logical connection here at all. Like, what was the plan? Like, when did the brother get a suit? How many suits are there? There's at least 3 by the end of the movie that we see. I cannot accept this clunky part of the story. How the brother's involvement happened, how Adrian even got in touch with his brother to say, hey, quickly get the suit and go to the friend's house. And then he knew maybe that Cecilia would kill him there? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense given how the scene was set up. That Adrian was not ever planning on doing that he was planning on staying the night in Cecilia's mental institution cell. I mean, I guess he was just going to stay there all night long. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know how I'm supposed to believe that the brother was able to quickly, just on call, ready to go, and show up in the house like a few minutes later. So I noted here the brother reveal that I thought was silly on its own. Again, everyone else thinks it's been the brother the whole time, but Cecilia tells us, and because we believe her, because she's our protagonist, that no, it's not him. It was Adrian, and Adrian's just making it look like it was him. Again, we just don't know anything about this guy except what Cecilia tells us, so we just believe it. So there's no real suspense, in my opinion. So here's where we kind of circled back to the throat-slitting issue I had earlier. So in the end of the movie, where Cecilia gets her revenge on Adrian in the very brief time that we get to see him, actually in physical human form. So yeah, she gets a suit, a third suit, I guess, that she, I think, stole from the house earlier when she went back in a previous scene. She cuts his throat, and it's kind of a cool scene, but again, it's like compared to the throat slitting that happened earlier, Adrian, chokes and gargles on his blood, and he falls to the ground, and, there's just enough time for her to say what she has to say to him, and then, he gets to look at her and slowly dies as he bleeds to death. The sister did not die that way. The sister died immediately of the same neck injury. So it's just, that was a more realistic version of how I think someone would die from getting their neck cut. The way the sister died earlier was just so ridiculous. And the last thing I have noted, I just wrote baby question marks. There's a point in the film where we just find out that, oh, Cecilia's pregnant, even though she thought she was taking birth control pills. The brother's Adrian's brother is telling her oh no, he knew you were taking this, so he switched them to placebos or something. Okay, it just sounds like this plot point that comes out of nowhere, serves no purpose except to up the stakes, make things more dramatic, and I guess gives Adrian a reason to really be kind of more obsessed with her. That's another problem, is I don't really know why he's so into her. Why is he so obsessed with this one chick to do all this? So yeah, anyway, we find out that she's pregnant. And by the end of the movie, I feel like that's abandoned. We don't ever hear about the baby again. And when the movie ends, there's no real way of knowing, is she going to keep the baby? Will she get rid of it because she doesn't want to have anything that has Adrian's DNA in it? Oh, and I almost forgot the part in the attic where Cecilia dumps a whole bucket of paint on our invisible man. And then within a minute, somehow he's gotten to the kitchen and we just get a shot of the sink running with some paint splashed around, and we're supposed to believe that he has wiped himself clean, that he's entirely spotless, before he starts attacking Cecilia there in the kitchen. It's all so ridiculous. There's just so many holes, in my opinion, and I'm not a person that focuses on, holes in logic or just holes in the story. A lot of people tear movies apart, even really, really good movies that have, logical fallacies. I don't really look at that, but they were just glaring in this film to me. So yeah, again, talking about earlier in the review, I think the big problem was not knowing really anything about Adrian, not understanding anything about the relationship, not knowing why he's so obsessed with her, and definitely having basically no information to go on other than that he's this, fiber optics, kind of inventor or something. Not the inventor, but he uses that technology to create things. When did he start making this suit? Did he start after she escaped? Because that's not a very long amount of time. In fact, when she escapes in the beginning, she runs through his lab, and we kind of see the area that's holding the invisible suit, which we don't realize that that's what's there at the time because we can't see it. I don't even understand, though, when he made the suit. And then he's got 2 or 3 that he made, one for him, one for his brother, and then, Cecilia ends up with one of her own in the end. So much of the movie just rubbed me the wrong way. Just too much that didn't make any sense to me. And I don't think it's just me, but maybe it is. So if you've seen the film and feel the same way, I appreciate you letting me know your thoughts in the comments below, because I feel really lonely in this opinion. I feel like I'm a very big minority here in my reaction to a film that a lot of people seem to like. And likewise, if you loved the film and think that everything I'm saying is ridiculous, then let me know that as well. I would like to enjoy this movie more, and maybe if some of these plot holes could be explained to me a little bit more, then maybe I'd be able to appreciate the film a bit better. So thank you so much for sticking through this with all me. This is a very long review. Basically, it was half a review, and then it's been kind of a long rant, but I needed that. I needed to get that out, my frustrations with the film. So I appreciate you so much sticking through this episode, and I will see you in the next one.